In this video, I'll be showing you how to edit videos inside of Kdenlive. Now, it's important to understand that the project does not start inside of the editing program. Instead, it starts with something more conceptual, like an idea. Once you have the idea, you might move on to maybe having a storyboard or a script, and then you'd gather the assets needed for the project. It doesn't have to be in that order, but typically it will start with an idea. Now, I won't be touching all the tools, but we'll be going over most things that you need to know to do a good edit. With that said, if you'd like to follow along with what I'm doing in this video, you can download the assets that I'll be using the link in the description. Next thing, we have the version of Kdenlive. I'll be using the latest version of Kdenlive. Download the one that's compatible with your system, either installable or portable. You can try both, see which one works best for you. I myself use Flatpak. We'll talk more about workspaces later on. Just note that if your workspace is different and you like to have the same workspace, go in the upper right corner and choose editing. Each one of these options is a different workspace. We'll get into that a little later. Once you have Kdenlive installed, we can launch it and familiarize ourselves a little bit with the user interface. Now, I won't be going too deep for now, but understand that you have different panels, different sections here, which you can resize simply by left-clicking, holding, and dragging them. You have different tabs, and each tab is a different panel or window, giving you access to different features and different options. You can toggle these on and off by going to the menu bar inside of View, and then check or uncheck any of these checkboxes. I would recommend going inside of Settings and taking a look. You don't really have to click on anything besides maybe the Run Config Wizard, and maybe eventually configure Kdenlive. If you're having issues with icons or text, you can try going to the application style, pushing it to Breeze, and then for color scheme, choosing Breeze Dark. Well, whichever version of Breeze you want, but choosing Breeze, basically. All right, so the next thing to do would be to set the parameters for our project. And by this, I mean, do we want it to be 720p? Is it going to be 4K, 1080p, 30 frames, 24 frames, so on and so forth? What's the aspect ratio? What are you trying to output at the end of this? You can always do different versions of it, but you still need to choose where you want to start. So to do that, we go inside of the menu bar, inside of project, and down to project settings. Inside of this window here, we can choose the profile along with a couple other parameters. So I'll go inside of Full HD 1080 and I'll choose HD 1080p 30 frames per second. You also have the option to create custom profiles. I have a tutorial on that. You can always check the other tutorials on my channel for some more advanced editing tricks. All right, so once we have our profile selected, press OK. There are other settings in there. You can always explore them. Now we have our project set to the profile that we want. We can start importing our assets. There are several ways to import your assets, but I'll start with the drag and drop. So if you've downloaded the files that I provided, you can simply extract the zip, select everything, and drag and drop it inside of the project bin. If you don't have the project bin open, go inside of the menu bar, inside of View, and make sure to check on Project Bin. Now, as soon as Kdenlive identifies a piece of media, it's going to offer the option to change to the profile of that media. I'm simply going to hit cancel because we already chose the profile that we'd like to work with. Now, if we click on these arrows here, we can see our assets. And so let's start editing. I'll click on this first video over here, and inside of the clip monitor, if you are inside of the editing workspace, so inside of the clip monitor, we're going to get a preview of this selected clip inside of the project bin. At the bottom here, you can left click, hold, and drag to scrub through the footage. This one is going to have a slightly slower playback for me since it's 4K. If you want to see more information about your clips, you can double click on them. It's going to open the clip properties tab. And in here, you can see the specifications of your media, whatever is selected inside of the project bin. Note that you can move these tabs around. You can also detach them and place them somewhere else. For now, I'll leave it there. Now to start adding our clips to the timeline. The timeline are these tracked down here. This is basically where you're going to do your edit. We're going to assemble what you would like to export in the end. One way to add your clips or assets is simply to left click, hold, and drag it onto the timeline and release. Now, if you scrub through the timeline, you're going to get a preview of what's on the timeline inside of the project monitor. So the clip monitor shows you what's inside of your project bin, and the project monitor shows you what's on the timeline where you're editing. So once we have our clip on the timeline, we can start editing. So basically you can trim it, which is to left click on one of the edges, hold and drag, and this will crop the beginning or the end. You can do it for both sides. And notice when you hover over the beginning, it gets a green highlight. And when you hover around the end, it gets a red highlight. That's how you can tell them apart. So these parts that we've cropped are not deleted, they're still available. You simply have to expand the clip back again. And so let's say that I want this to start around here. So not all the way at the beginning. I want to take a few frames out. I can move the playhead over here just so it snaps. We have these, well, I have the snapping enabled down here in the bottom right corner of the status bar. So I can click on the beginning, hold, drag, and it'll snap to the playhead. And now let's say I wanted to cut it. So let's say around here. One option, we could also grab the in and drag it in, or you can grab the razor tool, and wherever you left click, you have to click directly on the clip, otherwise it's not going to cut it. You can see here, no clip to cut. You have to click on it, and we can grab the selection tool again. And now we've just separated these two parts. You can simply delete them. That's one way of importing your clips onto the timeline. And now a different way, possibly better way of doing it, grab your clip, and inside of the clip monitor, you can scrub through it, identify where you want it to start, and then you can click on this little button here which says set zone in, or you can use the keyboard shortcut I, and it's going to crop to this part right here. It'll make sense in just a moment. And now let's identify where we want it to end. So in my case, it'll be right here when he's lifting off the ground. I'll click on this other icon here, set zone out, or the keyboard shortcut O, and it's going to crop to that point. And now if I were to left click, hold, and drag this onto the timeline, it's going to only import the segment that we've selected up here. But I don't want to import the audio since the audio is not going to be used here. So I'll delete this. So instead up here in the clip monitor, we have those two little icons here. We have a film strip and a speaker. And basically, if you left click on the film strip alone and drag it in, it's only going to bring in the video. And if you did it with the audio, the little speaker, it would only bring in the soundtrack. So how would we delete the soundtrack for this first clip that we imported? Well, you have several options. One of them is to right click on it and go to ungroup clips. You can also use the keyboard shortcut, Control plus Shift plus G. And once they're ungrouped, you can grab the audio separately and delete it. Otherwise, if I undo this, they move together. Another option to delete just the soundtrack is to hold down Alt, left click on it. You can see we're getting red outlines, and press delete. So let's go ahead and repeat this step with our other clips. So if I jump to this clip over here, you can scrub through the timeline to where you did your last cut. Hold down Alt and use the arrow keys to jump between cuts or the selected zone on the timeline, right? So this jumps all the way to the end. And now I can scrub through this clip and look for where it matches the most. So let's say over here, I'm going to set zone in, so where it starts. Then I'll scrub and find where I want to cut, and it's going to be right around here when he's about to hit the ground. Set zone out. And notice here we don't have the two icons for video and audio. That is because this clip here does not have any audio track. So it's not that the audio is silent, it just doesn't have it. So if I left click, hold, and drag onto the timeline, it's only going to bring in video. All right. So I'll hold down Alt, use the arrow key. First I'll click on the timeline to activate it so that we're at the end of this one. Now I'll do the same with the next clip. So it's going to be this person here, jumps, does a flip, and right before he hits the ground, so over here, I'm going to set zone in. Now I'll scrub to the point where I want to cut it. And let's say around here, I think. Press O on the keyboard for out. I'll drag just the video onto the timeline. And then finally, I'll repeat this with this clip over here. But if I change the zone, it's going to overwrite the previous zone that we had. And if we ever wanted to use that specific zone that we first had, then it would be gone. To avoid that, you can click on this little icon here, which is Insert Zone in Project Bin. Keyboard shortcut, Control I. Click on it, and now over in the project bin, notice we have a little arrow here. Click on it, and you have zone 1. So we've just saved that first zone that we had selected. So now we're free to scrub through the footage. Let's see here, if I jump here, scrub to the footage, identify where we want to make our endpoint. You can use the arrow keys to go back and forth as well. So I'll grab all of this and bring it in. I can press spacebar to play back. And we now have our cut. All right, now you can use a transform to zoom in so you can match their position better. We'll get into the transform in just a moment. Before that, I'm going to zoom in onto the timeline, and I'm going to do so by clicking on this little magnifying glass, which is Fit Zoom to Project. This is simply going to fit everything on the timeline, like visibly in front of us. So now we have our first edit. Now I'm going to add a fade out to this clip so it can fade to black. To do so, simply click on the upper right corner. You can either left click and then it's going to add a fade out, or you can left click, hold and drag so you can control the duration. Of course, if you simply left click, you can always drag it after, but I prefer to left click, hold and drag it myself. From there, I'm going to click on fade to black. So instead of fading to transparency, it's going to fade to a solid black, and I'll change the animation to cubic. So instead of having a linear fade to black, it's going to have a bit more attitude to it. Now we can go inside of graphics, grab our logo or drag it in here, put it on top here. And now here we understand a bit of how layers work or how tracks work. The V1, so if we look over here on the left, we have V1 for video 1, V2 for video 2, A1 for audio 1, A2 for audio 2. When you place a clip on a track above another track, it is placed above the track quite literally. So if I had a solid clip up here, it would block the clip underneath it completely. But in this case, we have an image with transparency, so it's like you can see through it still. So now I'm going to add a fade. So this time I'll click on the upper left corner and drag it in. And now the logo is going to fade in gradually. I'm going to click on the clip, change the animation to cubic in. Again, so it has a bit more attitude fading in. And there we have it. And lastly, the logo is a bit big, so I'm going to shrink it in size. And to shrink it in size, you can click on the star over here and choose transform. You can either double click on it or simply left click, hold and drag it onto the clip that you want to add it. And you'll have the options to control it inside of the effects and composition. This is basically what we've been using to tweak the values of the fade-ins that we've added so far. All right, so inside of the transform, down here in size, we can change the percentage. So let's say I go for 80%, and it's going to shrink the size of the logo over here. All right, you can click on these little arrows to collapse it. So we have our first rough cut, but over here in the beginning, I want to have a transition between the clouds and the next clip. I also want this first clip over here to be a little shorter. It lasts a bit long, so I'm going to crop it. Now, there are different ways of cropping. One option is you can snap the end of it to the playhead. To do so, you can press close parentheses. To snap the beginning to the playhead, you can use open parentheses. All right, and now we've left a big gap back here. There are several ways to close this gap. One of them would be to right-click on the track and go with remove space. Or notice that the top clip didn't move. You can right-click, say remove space in all tracks, and everything moves together. There's another tool that allows you to do this for other situations where this won't work. We'll see it in just a moment. So I want to add a transition between the clouds and this second clip over here. One way to do this is select the cloud clip, go up here above the timeline, you have mix clips. You can use the keyboard shortcut U or double click between the clips. And it's going to add this purple thing, which is a transition. If you click on it, you're going to get a couple options here. So you can control the softness, the duration, the position. The position is mostly which clip does it affects most. But if this feels a bit complicated, you can delete that and grab this clip over here, move it above, and simply drag it on top of this clip. Now notice it's simply going to cover it completely because again, it's now placed above it. And I want the transition to last 2 seconds. So I'm going to hold down Alt and I'll press the right arrow key so I can jump to this cut over here. So now if I hold down Shift and I press the left arrow key, the playhead is going to jump exactly 1 second. So I'll hold down Shift again and I'll press the arrow key and it jumps another second. And now I have 2 seconds of transition right here. So holding down Shift and pressing the arrow keys jumps 1 second in either direction. And in this case, 1 second is 30 frames because we're working at 30 frames per second. Now to add a transition between this top clip over here and this bottom clip, I can click at the bottom left corner, this little purple dot here, and it's going to add a composition track over here, this wipe composition. Now you can always change what a composition does. So we can go from wipe over here to all of these other options. But instead, what I want to do is change the wipe method from none to, I'm going to scroll down here and go to curtain. And now if we move forward, you can see how it has this curtain transition, but the edges are very rough. So inside of the effect and composition stack, I'm going to increase the softness significantly. And now it's going to give a more subtle transition from the clouds to this scene over here. All right. Now to add our title, I'll jump back in the project bin. I'll click on an empty area so there's nothing selected. And then up here, I'm going to click on this folder to create a folder, and I'll call this titles. Press enter to confirm. And over here, this little play button or video button, if you left click on it, it's going to open an Explorer window. This is another way of importing your assets. You can also import image sequences that way. You have this option down here, import image sequence, but I'm simply going to cancel out of this. And instead, I'm going to click on the little arrow next to it for this drop down. And in here, you have other options. You can add a color clip, image sequence as well, and you can add a title clip. So I'm going to add a title clip, left click. I have a tutorial dedicated to titles inside of Kdenlive, so I'm just going to breeze over this one. I'm going to write the word flip, and then I'll center it horizontally and vertically. The font that I'm using is Lilitia 1. You can download it from Google Fonts if you want to. You can change the color, but instead I'm going to use a gradient. I already have a gradient here. You can click on the pencil so you can customize the gradient. Just cancel out of this. I'm going to add a drop shadow, increase the blur. Now to see better how this is contrasting with the background, I'll check on show background, tweak the shadow a little bit. Once I'm done, press create title. Now we have our title clip, but I want to place it above all of our tracks. So I'm going to right click on this top track, insert track. We can add video, audio, video. You can choose above or below, choose how many tracks, etc. I'm simply going to create a new track called titles, click OK, and then I'll drag in the title. Now I want the title to appear at least 1 second after this starts. So I'm going to go to the beginning, hold down shift, press the arrow key and snap it to this playhead. Now I'm going to drag it all the way, snap it to the end of this transition down here. Let's add a bit of animation to our title clip. I'm going to go inside of the star, choose transform, drag it onto it. And now inside of transform, we can also create animations. To do this, I'll jump to the beginning using this stopwatch with the arrow. We already have a keyframe. I'll jump to the end over here and I'll add a keyframe. Jumping back to the beginning, I can change the Y value so I can move it up and down. So I'm simply left clicking, hold and dragging. So I'll move this over here, for example, and then jump to the end and I'll move this ever so slightly higher. Now you're going to see red outlines with the show height edit mode. You can also click and move your text on the screen and resize, etc. If you move to the right corner, you have these options here to zoom in and out of the canvas. You can add a grid. You can add some guides over here. You have a few options over here on the right side. All right, we have our animation. Now I want to change the interpolation. I'm not going to get too much into this. I'm just briefly going to show you. If I click here, go to Y position, this is the animation. It's a straight line. And I want it to have a bit more attitude. So being on the first keyframe, I'm going to click on the slope and I'll go to smooth. And now we get a little bit more of sassiness inside of our animation. All right, if I play this back, we're going to get this gradual up motion of the word flip. Now to add a transition, I'm going to click on the bottom left corner. It's going to add the composition track. But if I play back, there's no transition happening. So to fix this, inside of the effects and composition stack, we're going to go from composition track, switch it from automatic to V1 so that it knows that it's transitioning with V1. Now, if you play back, it's going to simply fade in. All right, now I'm going to switch the white method from none to curtain again. So curtain. And now it goes from under to above. I want it to do the invert. So I'm going to invert it. And now it's going to go from the top to the bottom. And I'll add a bit of softness to it. With that done, I'm now going to make it fade out or disappear. And to do so, I'll click on this bottom right corner, add another wipe. I'll change the method to dissolve, or I mean the curtain. And then I'm going to change the composition track from automatic to V1. So it's switching with V1 again. and I'll click on invert. So it goes upwards. I'll increase the softness quite a bit. And now when I play back, it's going to fade away. So now we have this big gap here with everything in the back. And if I were to right click and I go to remove space in all tracks, notice how it doesn't stop at the end of this track, which is basically where we'd want everything to snap to. So instead, I'll Control Z out of this. We can use the spacer tool, keyboard shortcut M. What the spacer tool does, it grabs everything that is after the cursor. So if I left click here, you can see everything gets selected and we can move it all together and snap it to the end. If ever you want to move everything that's just on one track, hold down Control, click on that track, and it'll grab everything on just that track. We've now finished the rough cut. We can add our music by going to the music folder, drag it in, but if I fit to timeline, you can see how this track is too long. So I'll Control Z out of this, zoom in again. I'll click by the end over here, set zone in, drag and drop it, and now I can match it to the end over here and drag it in. Now, when it comes to the soundtrack, I want the first cut here to happen on the beat. So this part right here. I'll drag it back. You can zoom in as much as you want. Now, your waveform is not going to look like mine. You can simply right click on the track here and separate channels. Otherwise, it's going to look like this. Separate channels. All right. And now I'll make sure that this starts at the beginning. I don't want the track to start playing as loud as it does from the beginning. Instead, I want it to fade in. To do so, I can click in the upper left corner here, click, hold, and drag, and it's going to add a fade in, so it's not going to start full volume. But still, I find that the volume of the audio is a bit too loud, and I would like to bring it down. So I'll click on the star, go to volume, keyframeable, add it to the soundtrack, and now I can lower the volume here. So I could say, for example, -12, which is lowering it quite a bit, or simply -6. Now, last but not least, you can do a bit of color grading or adjusting the values. I have tutorials dedicated to just that. You can click on the star and add a lift, gain, gamma to some of your tracks and modify their values over here. Right now, if this workspace is not comfortable working with these, you can always switch to the color workspace or the effects workspace for a smoother workflow, if you will. If I jump to the color workspace here, we now have some more information as to what we're working with, but we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves here. I'll jump back to editing and we can do simple tweaks. I'm going to make these slightly redder. Now, when it comes to the effects, by the way, if you go inside of the effects tab, you're going to have all of the effects available. And to make them go inside of the star here, you simply have to right click on them and add to favorite. Check the rest of my channel. You'll find plenty of tutorials dedicated to teaching you more advanced things with Kdenlive. All right, so last but not least, what we're going to do is place everything inside of a sequence. So I can Control A to grab everything, right click and go to create sequence from selection. Now, of course, you want to make sure you saved all of this first, probably. So go to file and save, but I'll call this comp1, it's okay. And now we've created a sequence, the comp1 over here, which has all of our cuts. And then it's inside of sequence as a single strip. If you go inside of sequences up here, this is what these sequences are. We have the sequence 1, which is the main timeline that we've been working with. And then we have now comp1. And this is good for things like if I go inside of images and I grab this computer screen here, it's an image, I'll place it above this, I'll stretch it out. And it doesn't fit the size, so I'll have to add a transform to it. And inside of the transform, we can click over here, I think it's this one, fit to width, and it's simply going to fit the width. You can also finish aligning it, so let's say vertically, as such. And to remove the green screen, I'll go inside of effects, I'll look for key. I have a tutorial dedicated to learning how to remove green screen, make our selection, as such. We can zoom in to see if there are any errors. It seems to have done a pretty good job. I'll zoom back out. And now with this sequence over here, we'll add a transform and we can scale it down. You can use the controls here. Click on the control or hold down, I think it's shift or control, shift. Hold down shift and then I can place it behind the screen here. Click. There we have it. You can also zoom in on the screen, the display, if you don't want it to be as small. And we've just placed this inside of the screen here. All right. Now, one more thing, this clip over here, I find it to be a bit slow and I'd like it to move a bit faster. So to do so, I can right click on it and go to change speed. And the higher percentage, the faster it moves, the lower the percentage, the slower it moves. So I'll write 150, press enter. You can see it's shorter now because it's faster. And if I play back, it still feels a little bit slow. And if we don't want to do the whole clicking, right clicking and going to change speed, you can zoom in here, hold down control. Before we do so, notice how we have a percentage up here, 150. So if I hold down control, left click, hold and drag, you can see the percentage goes up. So we're not trimming it, we're changing the speed of it. So I'll put it up here, playback. I like the speed. So now I can move everything or grab the spacer tool. But if I left click and try to move, it doesn't move. And that is because the soundtrack is being pulled as well. And it's already reaching the wall. So I can't pull everything back. I could hold down control, but it's only gonna move this track over here. So how do we get past this? Well, you could grab the selection tool and hold down shift, grab everything, or simply lock the soundtrack, grab the spacer tool, and now when you left click and drag, everything will move except the soundtrack. Now we can unlock it. All right. And there we have it. Now you can see that it's a little shorter. Let's just drag this in. And we're done. Once you're fully done, to export this, you can export either this sequence or this sequence. You can simply hold down control, press enter, or go inside of the menu bar, inside of project, down to render. Now, to have the extra options that I had over here, simply click on more options, and that's how you get these extra options. So choose the profile, the codec that you'd like to export as. So in this case, I'll go with generic HD for web, MP4, H.264, AAC. You can choose whatever works for your project or whatever you're trying to export. You can even export just audio if you want to. You can tweak the settings however you like. You have the parallel processing for faster rendering, but you can see it may cause artifacts. I rarely ever get artifacts, and by rarely, I mean I could probably count it on one hand. You can add metadata, choose the location where you want to save it, give it a name, so flip video, and then hit render to file. And then Kdenlive is going to do the render. Interesting thing is you can continue editing from this point on, and it's not going to affect the render. I can keep editing and it won't affect the render, and I can start another render after this render. So I could say, now I want to render this sequence over here with the table. And so I go inside of here and it's like, okay, I'm gonna render it with the same settings, render to file. Oh, I have to change the name, that's the only thing. 2, render to file. And once the first render finishes, the second one is going to start automatically, and it's going to be the sequence. So to learn more about Kdenlive, you can click on this playlist over here. It's a bunch of more advanced features. I also have 2 Kdenlive classes available both on SkillShare and Udemy. The links are down in the description.